Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. I'm so excited about this one because we've got two special guests. We've got Amber Jeffrey from the Grief Gang. Woo! And the lovely Amelia from the charity Suicide&Co. I'm going to let them talk a little bit about what they do first because I just want them to give it the credit that it actually deserves because it's both amazing. So over to you guys. Amelia, tell us about Suicide&Co, please.
Awesome, yeah. So hello, everyone. So I'm Amelia, one of the co-founders of Suicide&Co, and now work for them full-time. So we as a charity support people bereaved by suicide, and we are a service delivery organisation. So we have a counselling service where anyone who's lost someone to suicide over the age of 18 can access 12 sessions of counselling by our qualified counsellors.
Wow.
And we're delivering about 500 hours at the moment, a month, which we're very proud of. And we also have a helpline, an app, and tons of info online.
When I met you, the thing that just like, we accidentally met in U-Space randomly, and Amelia was like, hi.
I geeked out. I was like, I can't believe it's you.
That was my first celebrity kind of experience.
Yeah,
I loved it.
It was me.
But then she was telling me about, they offer a counselling service, and I had just been through some hell with finding a counsellor on the NHS. I'm sure a lot of you have probably experienced that, just how messy it is, and the waiting time is just crazy. And Amelia said that their counselling service was a 2-week waiting list. So I was like, okay, yeah, let's talk. So.
And then after you posted that...
Oh.
No, but I mean, look, it wasn't. No, I mean, like, no, credit to you in the community. Like, we had, like, 12 direct people applying for counselling after listening to the social clip, which is amazing and shows people are getting support. Oh. And now it's 4.5 weeks. 4 weeks.
That's still really good.
That's insanely good. Yeah. Like, people wait years for therapy, and the constant battle, like, I was finding it at the moment with like GPs and stuff, like the constant battle of trying to find help and it being rejected by the NHS constantly over and over again is so hard. And just you guys doing what you're doing, like, you're just saving the world.
Yeah. Talking of saving the world. Go on.
Is it working?
Yeah.
We're in, dialed in, settling peeps. Hello, everyone. It's really, really lovely to be here with you all tonight. Such lovely faces looking back. So I'm Amber Jeffrey. I'm the founder and the creator of an entity called the Grief Gang. And my story, I won't give you. I always find it funny when people are like, do I give the really long-winded story? No, I won't bore you all. But my story with grief goes all the way back to 2016 when I suffered the death of my mum, who died aged 51 and me being 19 at the time. And as probably many of us are acutely aware and familiar with, that you just get catapulted into a world of grief and unknown, and there's no roadmap to try and figure out this complete shit show. And so what I did to navigate mine was just bury my head in the sand for 3 years and thought I was dealing with the grief. And then it came violently knocking at my door in the summer of 2019. And it was like, no, enough now. We need to talk. And I was like, all right, fair. I've ignored you for 3 years. You know, you deserve my attention now. But it came in a way that was violent, it was dark, it was depressing. I was suicidal, and that's when I realised, shit, I need to do something before there's nothing that I can do anymore. And so I went from one extremity to the other. I also, as you mentioned earlier, sort of went down the route of finding a counsellor and therapist, and I found one at the time, and it didn't quite work for me, let's just say that, the PG version. And it really did do a number on me, if I'm honest. But what I did then was realise, okay, if therapy isn't for me, there's surely got to be something else that is. And I just thought, let me just see if there's anyone else out there who knows what it is like to navigate this world without their mum. Quite specifically at that time, I was looking for people who had just lost their mum, sort of thing. And I just said, I was on holiday with my partner, Joe, who's here. And, oh, you Joe.
Yeah, you Joe.
You'll hate that, you're like, for fuck's sake. And I sat on a lounger, had raging diarrhea, and that's important. It's important to say because I borderline thought, is this a delirious thought that I'm having? because I went, I'm going to start a podcast on grief. And I had no nutrients in me at all. And my partner was like, I don't know, like, oh. And he's like, it's a good idea. Like, you were quite unwell last month. And I was like, no, I think I need to find other people who understand. I just knew in my core, this was it. I knew I was going to, in some way, heal my grief and go on that journey by finding other people who understood it. And so I just said, yeah, it's going to be called the Grief Gang. And when I was Googling of like how to start a podcast, it was like, don't run away with the first name that you get. And I was like, fuck that, it's a wicked name. What are you talking about?
It's a great name.
I just went straight away and I was like decisive,
So
boom,
good.
boom, boom. And then I just launched it and I had no expectations. I just went, I just need to find other people who get it. And from, again, the long and short of it was it grew. And like it sadly grows, Grief Gang it is, as I always say. With any of our work, it's not something that we kind of want to grow in a way because we know as it grows, it means that more people are suffering and going through grief. But in that year of 2020, my community grew and it's continued to grow, and through its podcast, and I've not only branched out into, veering away from just parental loss, but meeting and interviewing people from all different walks of life and loss. And now finally get to do it as my full-time gig and work with amazing people in group circles, which some are here tonight, and just get to try and just change the way we talk and speak about grief, and just try and, all of it has always been to try and heal that 19-year-old Amber.
100%.
And it's been the greatest gift of my life.
Aww.
Yeah, thank
Round
you.
of applause.
Congratulations.
So I first... Oh?
Well, yeah, I was going to say we should probably introduce ourselves.
Yeah, I guess
So-
that's... You go for it.
Yes. So we are Amy and Alicia. Amy, Alicia from If We Don't Laugh.
We'll cry.
We'll Cry podcast.
I always do forget that bit.
Yes.
It's too long a name for Instagram or TikTok. You have to be If We Don't Laugh.
But it is called If We Don't Laugh, We'll Cry.
Yeah.
Because ain't that the truth? So we both lost our mum. We're sisters. We both lost our mum. I was 16. Amy was 20. Yeah.
I think
You were.
timings just go.
It just, yeah. And we didn't really speak about it for a long time. We had a few conversations, but we really did the same thing and bury our head in the sand for the first good few years. I think you pretended she was alive for maybe 5 of those?
2. Not in
2.
that weird way. Well, it is weird.
It is weird.
Because grief is weird. That's the whole point of this. Yeah, because grief is weird. It makes you do weird shit.
Yeah.
And it makes you feel like a weirdo. But we all go through... It's very different for everyone, of course, but you're not a weirdo for experiencing grief. It just makes you do weird shit.
Exactly. One of them being that for 2 years.
One of them being that. It was more like if I was around a table and my boyfriend's parents basically asked me, what does my mum do at the dinner table? So I pretended that she was alive in the present tense. That sort of shit.
Yeah.
Like, it's just easier to do that.
Yeah.
It's just easier.
But then I suppose it got to the point where we were like, we are sisters and we were both there, so let's like bring that up, I guess. And we were sat in the park and we decided that we were going to just talk about it and we were going to give her that light that she deserved. And we did. And we felt so connected to each other and we felt so less alone than we've ever felt before. And we just decided that that was something that we needed to do regularly, scheduled in, weekly. And then the podcast was born.
Yeah, exactly. That's crazy when you put it like that. But
Yeah.
right, enough about us. I want you guys to just take a minute to basically think about the intention of why you're here, the purpose of why you're here. The reason I'm saying this is because I did a couple of festival talks, and I basically just thought, if you're going to something that could be a bit heavy, that could bring up a few like emotions that we're usually quite scared of, I think it's good to recognise the purpose of why you're putting yourself there. So is it to remember who you've lost? Is it to start processing something? Just have a think about that. You can either write it down or just keep it in your head. But I think it's important to have that as a basis before we start. Okay.
Can I just also, say about my socks? I don't know if you can see my socks, but I think it's a bit of an elephant in the room. So they are fluffy and they have slots on, and I don't know if you know, but every time, Yeah, I know. And every time I go into a depressive episode, I somehow end up in these socks, and I didn't see that I was wearing them until I was getting changed about 20 minutes ago.
Make of that what you will.
So
exactly.
make of that what you will. But I am aware that they look the way they do. So yeah, leave it out, would you?
Should we do a bit of breath work before we? Should we do that?
Yeah, let's do a 2, 4, 6, 8, shall we?
Ooh.
Done.
So we'll breathe in for 4, we'll hold for 6, and we'll breathe out for 8. When you're ready, go in.
It's really hard to hold for 6 seconds.
Yeah, don't worry if you can't, because I can't a lot of the time. But
They're freaking out.
And again?
yeah, we'll keep going.
Pretty good.
That feels pretty good.
Feels pretty good.
I was dialed out there.
Eyes closed.
I think it's really important to do breath work. So I think with anything with grief, it's just, as you so beautifully said earlier, like we're setting the intentions. It's really good. You know, we're all coming from busy days of our lives and all different parts, and just to take a moment just to bring stop to just come back to you.
100%. I hate that it's always the cliche advice that works the most as well.
I know.
Like, go outside, have a shower.
Yeah.
All of that.
Eat right.
Yeah. Innit? And I do it, and I'm like,
it's good for me, but I don't want to do it.
Yeah, but it works.
Yeah.
I've been in therapy, like Alicia said recently.
woo, wow.
But I didn't know, you know when you start therapy and people say, it's going to get worse before it starts to feel better. I didn't know that was as true as it really is. Like, I'm in the pits,
Yeah.
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 unfortunately.
I don't think people do know that either sometimes. Oh, let me know if you need help. I didn't know that when I first went into therapy. I did not know it was going to get worse before it went better.
Really?
It got better, no. So I'd be like coming out of sessions being like, what the hell? Why aren't I walking on like cloud 9? Instead, I'm being shoved back onto the street, like aggressively crying, being like, this is awful.
How long have you been in?
Huh?
How long have you been in therapy?
Well, I mean, so I also realized I didn't share my personal story. I was just like, business, charity, which is what I can do. So, no, I also lost my mum, and I lost my mum to suicide when I was 19. And so the first time I accessed therapy was about a year and a half afterwards. So the like rhetoric, I wasn't necessarily, I wouldn't say burying my head in the sand, but I took the rhetoric from my family and friends who were all fab, that I needed to stay on the rails. Like I was at uni and I liked to party, and I think they were all freaking out that I was going to do that too much.
Yeah.
And then I needed to not let it define me. And I don't actually really know where the root of that came from, but I felt it. Mm-hmm. So I was like, I will be fine, and I will not show any weakness. And that just deteriorated my mental health massively.
Yeah.
I think the first thing that drove me to therapy was I lost a lot of the back of my hair to alopecia.
Really?
Yeah, and I went to the doctor and was like, this is happening. And he was like, oh, it's stress-related. Do you have any stress? And I was like...
Do I?
No. Because I was seeing stress. I was like, I don't have any stress. I was like, I'm at uni. Like,
my God.
I thought stress was like finance problems and like family. Like, and at the time,
Not your mum dying.
No,
not that.
And then I was like, oh well, like, and this was 6 months after my mum died by suicide, and so anyway, then I got some new like vitamins, and it sort of got better, but a year after that is when I first went into counselling, and I was there for about 4 months that time, and that first roller coaster was helpful, but it was also intense because nobody had told me what it was like. And now I'm in counselling because the job I do every day is suicide and grief,
of course,
and I have it every
you need
week.
That. Yeah.
And it's like supervision, and I've had it for 2.5 years.
But isn't it amazing? Like, you guys, you work in that when that was such a huge part of your life in such a negative way, and now you have chosen to, and you too. Like, it's crazy that you've chosen to do that. That's amazing.
I mean, for me, it was 8 years afterwards, and it was just because of, like, after I went to therapy, that was the first time I was like, oh, God, I think I'm going to be able to heal. Like, genuinely, I went for a year and a half being like, this new normal, this disgusting, horrible feeling I feel of darkness is just going to be my life. And then I was like, oh, hang on. I feel like it's going to heal. That didn't mean I spoke to anyone about it. You know, that didn't mean I didn't lie and say fake professions and shit like that. I did. And
You did?
Yeah, I did. Yes. Oh my God, I did. But also, like, I'd find people being like, where's your mum for Christmas? And I'd be like, Berkshire? And just be like, I don't fully know. But I was just like, it was such awkward questions. And, like, they'd ask at the middle of a desk, like, in the workplace. Horrible.
Yeah.
So, and the reason that I then went into it was because I think it is so inaccessible, therapy. I think most people can't afford it. Most people can't find the expertise. And if you've got a bereavement in general, if you've got a complex bereavement like suicide or sudden loss or child loss, loads of stuff around that, it's hard to find a therapist. And also then you've got to get on with them, so that takes a few tries. You know, it's just not a playful space, and I think it needs to be. So yeah.
And it's an expensive space.
Yeah.
A very expensive space.
That word there, playful, is really, really interesting there, Amelia, because it's so right. It's not a playful space that, in terms of accessibility, that you can kind of just frivolously kind of play around with. And it does. It's often with finding the right therapist and the right form of therapy is often referred and compared to like dating. It is kind of like finding the right partner, and you've got to try and kiss a few frogs before you find whatever. Yeah. But it's like when you're in crisis, you don't have that luxury to be like, oh, I'll just play around, kiss a few frogs, and hope you find the right therapist. It's like when you're in crisis, you're not. And it's interesting, Amelia and I are very good friends, but like our models of our work are so different. I, for a long time, was fuck all therapists. And I'm very happy to say that's not my view at all now, but because that came from a place of my experience of it. Yeah. I turned to therapy in a time when I was in crisis, and I felt that I was met with a very cold demeanour, and it just wasn't what I was looking for. And as you were saying, of like, finding the right therapist, and sometimes one-to-one therapy, or what our traditional sphere of therapy isn't for everybody. Yeah. But it's really hard in a society where, with anything with mental health and mental illness, and specifically grief, the only model we have is kind of go to a therapist, go to a counsellor, and they'll sort you out. And then when you go there and you perhaps don't really feel that you do fit in there, you're not aligning, you can feel so alienated, and that's completely how I felt. And I remember walking away from that experience in 2019, 3 years after my mum died, being like, I'm too fucked up even for therapy. And I was like, this is bleak. Yeah. And so with my work, it took me a long time to really actually unpack that and not realise that all therapists were nasty people, because they're not. It just was, I didn't find the right one at that time, and it wasn't the right time for me to go into the room and to do that work. And what was the right time for me was to have peer-to-peer support. And finding people who understood it. And that's why I think when we're talking about within therapy, it's really important to include the importance of peer-to-peer and group support, because it is a type of therapy. Yeah. And people that I work with, if you can and it's feasible to, having both of them running alongside each other can be beautiful. Having that experience in a group setting with other people who really genuinely understand what you're going through, and not that your therapist won't, of course, but then having that one-to-one time with a therapist to really unpack that can be a really, really beautiful concoction. But sometimes for more people it is more one-to-one, sometimes it is peer-to-peer. I really do love the conversation nowadays that there's a lot more room to explore different modes of therapy. But it's a tricky road to find the right one, for sure.
Yeah. I think for me, I struggled a lot with getting there, like getting to the point where I was like, all right, I'm going to make that decision and I'm going to go to therapy. I started therapy this year, May, I think. I'm in early therapy, and Mum died 7 years ago. And I was at school at the time, so I was in the counselling system that we had at school.
Shit.
Shit. She did her best, but
sorry, yeah.
She's like, she did her best.
I just say that because the education system has a bad look in my eyes.
It was a shit show. It was a shit show, and it put me off for a long while. I didn't want to accept that I needed therapy. I didn't want to accept the fact that this was something that happened to me that I now have to do the maths for, and I now have to sort this out, when I never chose this to happen to me in the first place. And I think that was the hardest part for me, was accepting the fact that, yeah, it's unfair. I never chose this to happen to me. I never wanted this life for myself. But I have it. And, like, I can either sit in it and just let it take over, or I can start to, you know, build a life for myself, because I'm going to be here regardless. And, like, it may as well be nice.
Great. Asking for help is always the hardest part, one of the hardest parts of it. Just actually, and especially, you know, hearing you talk there, Alicia, reminds me so much of me, of the first part of actually saying out loud to my loved ones, like, I'm not okay, like, I'm not good, when you're someone who might really pride themselves on being able to just get through shit and get through life and because it feels like admitting defeat, which it totally is not, but in that moment you feel like, fuck, I can't do this on my own. And so I'm just going to, whether it is a loved one around you or into a professional space, and just saying, I need help, and putting that hand out is one of the most bravest first steps to do. Totally.
Exactly.
Totally agree.
I feel like there's just so much shame as well. Like, it wasn't, I don't know what my decision was about not doing therapy and not talking about it. I think it was more just like, this isn't happening. But there is a level of shame. I think it's getting less with therapy. It's so much more normalised now, which is amazing.
It's still there, though, for sure.
But it's still there. And I feel like shame within grief as a whole, it comes and presents itself in so many different ways. Like, we've had losses, through suicide and then not suicide, and the different griefs is crazy. And the guilt and the shame aspects of that type of death and a different type of death is wild.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, I think also, like, service access isn't cool. Like, it's just not. Like, getting help is just not cool. Like, young people are cooler with it. Older generations, oh my God, the amount of people that come up to me and be like, well, the thing is, I don't need therapy. And I'm like, oh, fantastic for you. Oh my God, what have you found? This is like so brilliant. I'm just like, what an amazing self-diagnosis you found. Like, well done. And it's just this weird thing of like, it's so uncool, but it's also just this like playfulness of like, yes, like look at a food menu. You're either going to be like, oh, I'm going to have that because I always have it and I love it. Or like, I'm going to try something completely different. And if I don't like it, I'm not going to have it again.
Love that.
Like, it's just not that difficult. But we are so, including me, for 8 years, I wasn't going to listen to a podcast. I wasn't going to follow an Instagram account. I wasn't going to talk to, I just wasn't. Yeah. I was like, this is not what I do for grief. Yeah. And I feel like that, some of it's shame, some of it's also disinterest. Like, genuinely, when we first like got into the space, looking at Instagram accounts about grief was like grannies drinking a cup of tea with crying. Like, I was like, I don't feel this vibe. This is not my experience. Like, when I was 19, that was not my experience. Like, I have to be a bit political about the other charities in the space, and I actually, all of them I have huge respect for. But from a brand perspective, we have upped our game as a charity sector. Like, I'm not joking. It used to be like very clinical and very like, I'm already feeling shit. This is making me feel worse. So I think in terms of like all generations, in terms of like what we watch on Netflix, all of that stuff, we've all got higher expectations, and I think the sector, NHS is far behind, but the sector, we needed to get up there to be like, I actually want to go to that group, I want to go to that venue, I want to go to that talk, because before that, like, nobody wanted to, for good reason.
Well, that's the point of what we do, right? It's like to make it normalized. And because like I was speaking to my friend before, and she said that she told her work that she's coming to a grief event, and apparently her work was like, like didn't know what the hell to say. And it's like, how are we still scared like of going to, it's not like we're all gonna like it's not that scary. But that's the point. And I think the more talking we do, that obviously the more things like this we do, the easier and the cooler it will be, because it's something that's going to affect every single person. What is it that you said? Everyone.
It's the only like universal thing that we have. It's like being born and dying, and like we all go through it, and no one knows what to say. No one knows what to do. No one talks about it. There's no room for it anywhere. And it's just shit. Like, why?
No.
We're going to change that.
Just why? No, it's
But
so true. Because do you want to go?
No, I was just saying, things under shame. I think they take time to destigmatize and stuff like that. And I think that the progress is being made in a big way. And also, like, we do stuff with businesses all the time, like, and as do you. And like, it's not rocket science. Like, we're not talking about like a full new language, even when you're talking about something like suicide loss, which is so difficult for people to feel comfortable in talking about. You know, we're talking about a couple of key things that can make the situation for everyone involved way more comfortable.
Yeah.
And if we felt that level of comfortability, that level of confidence, like, oh God, shit would be so much easier.
No, I've heard so many horror stories, and I've actually lived a few horror stories of like workplace experiences and like experiences in education when you're going through grief. Like, I was in uni, and it's just, I don't know if anyone else has experienced this at uni or at school, but it's crazy. Yeah. Like, it's just, you are quickly shown like how much you're just a number, is what I'm trying to say. Like, there's no compassion, and especially in my experiences, but I've been reading a lot recently about all the changes that, well, apparently are being made. Do you know more about that? Because you said that it's improving as a whole education system.
Unis, I mean, higher education is more under the limelight now. I was actually talking to somebody today who's just created this new guidance as a researcher called Jo Smith. She's created 2 different new forms of guidance, one for suicide prevention and one for postvention. And obviously this is specific to suicide loss, but it's a big problem in universities. And I think the thing that I see shifting is the media does not help this, but we've seen like a lot of a blame culture, especially with suicide. It's like Ofsted, Bristol University, Cambridge University. We've seen some really horrific articles which deserve to be written, but if everybody's afraid of being blamed when there's actually no fucking blame, that nothing actually happens, they don't have to take any action or anything, we need people to move towards accountability. Like, you had a part to play. If you aren't accountable, we can't make changes to make it safer for everyone else involved, and it's not scary when you step into that space. Like, so I think that's what we're seeing more of now. Like, even around World Suicide Prevention Day, the rhetoric used to be chat to a mate. This year, it was far more complex. It was not oversimplifying it. Some of them were, but majority were going, right, this is a really complex issue. Let's reach out for help. Let's talk to a professional if we need to. Let's also talk to mates. Let's go to groups. Like, it was better. We're getting better, which is good. It's positive.
Nice.
Yeah.
I suppose that, like, fear of, like, going to therapy, like, it is very real. And it's hard because we're all talking about therapy, and, like, so many people don't get to financially afford therapy. And I think that's why it's so important to have, you know, peer groups and, like, ways that people can talk to each other without having money, because like just because I've lost someone doesn't necessarily mean that I can afford anything, like a funeral or like anything like that. So like I think that just makes me sad that there will be people that can't afford it.
I know. And I think when you lose someone when you're young as well, like there's a lot of things in schools, like you said, and like that do help to an extent, but they don't really get to the deep bits that you need. But then there's no one that is to blame for that, is there?
Yeah, totally.
It's just really, really tough. And losing someone when you're young, I think, obviously gives you a whole new experience. So you were like 16, weren't you?
Yeah.
And that's when you were saying recently about how when something happens like that tragic to you when you're that young, like it can actually stunt your development into an adult, because it's something that, I don't know. I mean, you know better than me.
I mean, the way I see it is like, it happened to me when I was so small, like I was 16, and as much as I felt like an adult at the time, my brain hadn't developed yet, and I hadn't even learnt how to, you know, cook a meal or anything. Like I hadn't really got to the age where I had started to learn how to look after myself. So like to be so small and to lose a parent, at the time I was angry and I was upset that it was happening to me, but it was also complex. Like I felt like a TV character. I felt like a Tracy Beaker kind of character. I felt like any sort of Jacqueline Wilson character is how I felt.
Yes.
And like for a while, it was like, okay, this is my new identity. I'm the dysfunctional kid at school. And then I left school and I went to uni, and it was like a whole new world. Like I'm just launched into this whole new education system, which again was another distraction for me. But then after uni, 2 years ago, I've now graduated 2 years ago, and like that's the hardest part for me so far, is there's no structure anymore. There's no tutors there that can act as parental roles or anything like that. Like I'm just plummeted into this world that I don't have the tools to live in. And like it's hard because when I came to uni, I really thought about everyone's going through this right now. Everyone's leaving their families. Everyone's leaving and learning how to look after themselves. And I'm just going to be like them. I'm just going to be a kid that's like learning how to cook. And slowly I kind of realized that like every single aspect of my life has been affected. My relationships, my friendships, the way I eat, every single thing is grief. At the moment.
It touches everything.
It touches every single thing, and like I don't think I ever understood that it's more than, oh, I just miss that person. Like, oh, they're not here anymore, I just miss them. Like, my whole brain has been shifted now in a way that's like, I now have to learn how to deal with. And like, I think it's just important that what we want to do is kind of bring that up and like talk about the fact that grief is so much more than what you see on TV. It's so much more than what you see in films. It's not just like, I don't know, missing someone and wanting them to come home. It's absolutely everything. And like, I think, that's what I want to do.
Yeah. Oh, Alicia, so much in there. I was really it was really beautiful and really vulnerable. So thank you. And as you were talking, oh my gosh, I could just hear like 19-year-old me as well. And that just so much of how you know, even as, you know, probably when your mum died when you were so young, it's, you know, there might have been people around you who had a similar experience to you, but like you said, you could have easily slotted into that uni frame of like, oh, everyone else here is leaving their family home, and yet I can just blend into the background of just a kid who's going to uni and figuring it all out. And then when you step out of it and you are like, you learn this identity, you realise how much your grief has formed and is still forming your sense of self. And it can be a really amazing part. There's probably aspects of yourself that you find, of all of you here, finding out parts of yourself that like, fuck yeah, there's some really, like I always say, I like me more after my mum died than before my mum died. Yeah. And it's, you know, it's weird to say that because I was 19 and I was like, I, like you, kind of thought I knew what I wanted from the world, who I was, and I thought I'd really built my strong sense of self. But actually, that like I've grown up with grief in all my formative years. Grief has ran alongside me and has been like the kind of devil and angel on my shoulder, and been at the base of a lot of decisions that I make about me, about the outside world. And it's played to my strengths sometimes, totally, and sometimes it's played to my absolute weakness of just like, fuck yeah, of like when as you're getting older and, you know, maybe start to thinking about things like starting a family or whatever it might be. And it's like you kind of, you know, I'm 8 years into it and it's kind of like sort of, you know, being able to get my mum's sort of grief and in my pocket. And then it's these things again that come and you go, oh shit, yeah, I am just a girl who's without a mum. And it all comes crashing down and again, you kind of go right back to the person you were when you lost them. And it is, you will always kind of return. There's you know, lots of studies and stuff of like, how we respond to a lot of, you know, anything in our life, hardships, whatever it is. We sometimes don't respond with like our 27, 28, 25, whatever age year old brain. We respond with the brain that was when we had that trauma.
Yeah,
so like when you are a child, if you're bereaved as a child or whatever age you are, even if you're in your, you know, getting 30s, 40s, 50s, when that grief or like a grief bomb arrives, whatever it might be, you sometimes don't respond with like that, oh, I've been grieving for like 20-something years. I go right back every single time.
When I respond in anything, I respond as 19-year-old pissed off Amber, like if I'm really in a bad spot, and it's realised you kind of do always revert back to that age when the trauma happened. And it's like, it's always, you know, talking about the inner child and all that shit, but it's like you do have to tend to it. That little child will always come up like first and foremost with everything. Yeah.
My co-founder and I, Emma, who is a northerner who should have been here, by the way, is unwell. No, but she and I always talk about the fact that we have this like scar. We always talk about it like scars, like abandonment issues, like, and one of them's catastrophic thinking. And like, my God, still, I'm 13 years on, and I will also like lead on a positive note. I'm not as bad with this now, but genuinely, like the way that it serves me has been so bad. And before I realised, I mean, I have a friend who's like one of those people that's like so epic on WhatsApp. Like you message and she's like, boom. You know, all the time, response. It's like, do you just sit on your phone? But she didn't respond to me for like 3 hours. I had called her mum, her sister, her boyfriend. I was like, she's dead. Yeah. Like, in my head, that is where I had got to. Yeah. And I mean, like, it is absolutely mad. Yeah, it's crazy. But I also, like, I lost my mum at 19, 3 weeks after I turned 19. And so still very much felt like a child and was like, oh, this is all right, fucker. And I feel like like being a young person and grieving and having to organise a funeral and do all of that stuff, it does feel really unnatural. And I also feel like, you know, older generations can find it really tough as well to kind of like involve, guide, like know how to do these experiences that are supposed to be full of joy and, you know, new life and new stuff. It's so shit.
Honestly, organising a funeral, full stop, is, fucked up. But, like, as young as we were, again, it shouldn't. The cracks you see in your family as well. When the
weddings and funerals, weddings and funerals.
Yeah. There's so many politics, and I've also never felt rage like it. I don't think. When as well, like I did when I was planning Mum's funeral, and also when I was planning Fran's funeral, it was like, that person upset her in year 8. You're not coming. Like, I had to be like, these are the exes, we're not allowed there. Like, I was like some bodyguard, like actually turned into a security guard. And it was just like, for what? Like, the thing is with funerals, there's always going to be people there that you feel like shouldn't be there. I feel like everyone has that kind of anger at funerals, especially if it's someone close to you. You feel it's like the Grief Olympics, right? Isn't that what they call it? It's like, my grief's harder than yours, so don't come, all of that. And it's really, really hard to navigate. And I think I feel like it was all a blur now.
Well, I think for us, we so we lost our mum, and then when Amy was 21, she lost her best friend, Fran, to suicide. And I then turned 21 and lost my best friend. And so, so my best friend was called Eliza. Amy's best friend was called Fran, so that's who we're referring to. But we were very angry. I'm a very angry girl at the moment. And I was at the time. And when we were planning the funeral, it was like we wanted it to be perfect because we were her daughters and we knew her and we knew what she wanted and we knew, like, from our perspective, that we wanted it to be perfect for her. And then there's times where, and then people come in and you can't control it. And I think at the end of the day, you've just got it's out of your hands. Like, if you're going through planning a funeral at the moment, like, there's obviously going to be people that you don't want there, but there's people that you do want there, and that's who you stick with, and that's who you stay with.
Do you remember the man that...
Yes.
You said yes already.
Funeral stories.
The best.
Little bags of them.
This man came up to me and Alicia at Mum's funeral and said, what did he say? How do you know
her? Who are you?
Yeah, who are you?
How do you know her?
I swear to God.
Are you cousins?
And we were sat there looking at him like...
I was like, I'm the last one in this gaff. I'm her daughter. I'm taking this home. What do you mean? Who are you?
I've got to clean up the plates.
It is the behaviour at funerals, isn't it? It's, as you said perfectly, the Grief Olympics. And it's like, I love that term, the Grief Olympics, because it is really hard, as you said, like when like people, you know, if you are really close to the person who died and like, you know, full well, they don't want that ex come in or that friend or how they really felt about someone. And then you see them like big boo-hooing at the front and you're like, shut the fuck up. Like, what are you?
We're like, we shouldn't judge, but we are.
Oh, yeah.
Stop.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's So
like, just stop, like, and not in the way of all, grieving, but more of like, you're a prick, like, And I'll never forget, as part of that, at my mum's funeral, like, her sister's very warped, very weirdo behaviour, and we don't speak no more, but we were at the graveside, and it was just so theatrical, and I was, of course, you're sad, it's your sister's died, but it was real, like, we're doing the service, ashes to ashes, dust to dust, and she's there, like, ooh, in my ear, and I just turned around and I just went, a bit quieter, please, like, come off it, like, fuck's sake. And it's just sometimes sometimes with these things, you just got to let people have their 10 minutes, have their thing. And it's more, for people who have, like, done your loved one wrong and who are coming up, and it might fuel you with rage. And it's sometimes, I took a lot of what I took from when, like, with my mum's funeral, and if there was anyone who'd done her dirty or just really felt like didn't have a right to be there, I took a lot of peace, maybe in like a sadist way, of being like, you've got to live with that guilt for the rest of your life. Yeah. Like, you're stood here now at her coffin and asking for redemption and stuff, and like, I don't have to live with that. So, I'll let you come. I'll let you do your thing, and just, let people do what they need to do to kind of, heal themselves and go on their journey too. And if they have been arseholes, it's hard. But when, it's really visceral, you're like, you have no right to be here. But sometimes in a way, we can't put ourselves in front of other people's healing. Yeah. And, but of course, within limitations, someone's been, like, abusive and horrific, of course. Yeah. But, it's techie. It's techie.
It's very techie.
Sticky Amelia, one still.
Sticky one. Amelia, I actually just thought earlier today of a question I wanted to ask you, just from me to you.
Yeah.
And for all you guys. No, I'm asking all of you, obviously, but I feel like you're, you got the qualifications to give me an answer.
Okay.
So,
you're like,
pressure. Yeah. So I lost Fran, my best friend, to suicide. Yeah. And after that happened, I went on this rampage of trying to save people.
Oh, yeah.
And I didn't know if that was like a thing that happens with suicide deaths, or because I was like obsessed with saving this girl from my school who I didn't know, who'd posted a story about being mentally unwell, and I took it upon myself to just flood her DMs. Yeah. It was like basically started a hashtag movement at this point. But
another
no,
podcast.
I didn't really. But I was just really trying to, like, I felt like it was my responsibility because I knew what the pain was. Yeah. I knew the pain that comes from that sort of death. Now it's my responsibility to make sure nobody ever feels it again. And it was like it must have been a distraction. But I didn't even remember this until the other day. And then I was like, I need to ask you about this.
Yeah, I mean, that is literally like the most common thing ever. Yeah. Oh. And also, like,
you're never alone.
I mean it. Like, and I mean that in validating your experience, because it's just like so. I feel like, especially in suicide-related grief, like suicide prevention is a much more progressive, active, like fucking powerful sector. Like, I love being involved in it in the way that we're being involved in it, and I think it's really common for people, well, I know it's really common for people who've lost loved ones to suicide to go into fundraising, to go into campaigning, and a lot of what you said there, like, yes, it could be a distraction, whatever, but also, like, it makes us feel good, and helping others makes us feel good, and to fill your cup in that way at a time when, you're feeling sad is really powerful. The other thing I'd say, which you kind of said around one specific friend, was like replacing your worry and like finding a new target is just like also a real reality. Like my best friend had like a vague drinking problem. Like it wasn't a bit full blown. She's completely fine now. But I was like, this is my new thing.
Yes.
I am now concerned about you.
Yeah.
And I'm going to talk about it quite a lot. And she ended up talking to other friends of ours, being like, I mean, this is getting quite intense. Like, and I'm like, I'm not joking about like alcohol abuse. I'm joking about the fact that, like, for me, I wanted a worry. And if I could find it, I'd be like, do you need... No, you don't need me. Do you? No, okay. Like, and I had to... But because my mum had bipolar, and even though I wasn't aware of the severity of the mental crisis she was in versus the physical, because a lot of it was coming out in physical ailments, I was very used to growing up. I mean, she was ill from when I was the age of 9, so I was very used to growing up with like a vague worry of like, if there's something on the news, I'm going to message her. If there's somebody who's died, I'm going to check back in. So when I lost that, I was also in a like weird way missing that kind of like savior side in me. Yeah. So I think all of that is really, really common, yeah. And I also think with suicide death, it's complex. It fucks with you. You're like, what is death? What is death by your own hand? What is suicide? It's so fucking complex. Yeah. And my biggest piece of advice is around it is like, whatever you're wanting to understand and talk about, like, find a space where you can do that. Because unfortunately, in the current system, if you go and someone who's like, I'm trying to understand more about suicide, people will be like, risk, and normally it's risk, you can't be in the service, right? Whereas even with our counsellors, we're like, suicide represents itself so differently in suicide loss. Like, I'm questioning suicide, or I'm no longer afraid of it, And like, some are harder to work with as a counsellor, within ourselves. But yeah, it's that all of that is very normal, and just being able to find spaces to validate that is key.
Yeah. I think, like I said before, like, the difference in my grief from suicide death to other was wild. Yeah. But it was interesting what you're saying there about the saviour complex, because I feel like that was the thing that kept me going, because I was looking after you. So it was like, that got me through it in a way. Not through it. I'm not through it. We never get completely through it, if you know what I mean. It's like, it's not a linear process, but you're going to be able to deal with it more and more each day, is how I like to look at it. But it helped me focus on something else. Yeah. And I think, obviously, that led to a further suppression. I was going to say submission, suppressant.
Yeah. Well, it kind of like gives you. It's being honest with yourself, isn't it? About of like, is what you're doing giving you purpose in a time that feels really purposeless and is genuine? And I think so much of what we do and why we do what we do is giving ourselves a sense of purpose, but being honest with yourself of being like, is me looking after everyone, trying to save everyone from taking their own life? Is this me wanting to do something to like make a difference to do, or am I running away from something from me? And it's being honest with like what you feel like this purpose is. Totally. But no, I totally get it, and it makes there's so many things in grief that would, like, when you say you're like, oh, I don't know if I'm this, and like, you're not alone, because you really, really aren't, like, and as you so beautifully said, like, not to like invalidate your experience or of being of like what you thought a lot of people think, but there is not one original thought in grief. No, there's not one, and it's really humbling. It's really humbling. Yeah. I remember when I started Grief Gang, I remember thinking, I've got some twisted thoughts in my head, boy. Like, I ain't right, I ain't well. And then would like speak to people on the podcast or online, and like 20 people would come and be like, yeah, same. And I was like, I ain't had a fucking original thought since my birth. Like,
so specific as well. Some of them are weird.
So you really think, oh, this one's a bit, I might maybe not get one or two. And everyone's like, yeah, and you're like, ow. And it's so humbling, because there's sometimes I went through a weird thing of being like, no one knows what this feels like. There's just no one on this world who has these thoughts in their heads. And then meet people and they'd be like, yeah, and I was a bit like, oh. Yeah. I was like, I'm not alone, but I'm not alone. I'm not alone. So it was humbling to actually realise, like, fuck yeah, there's not a single thought in grief that if I ask like my community or just ask someone, get the people like, yeah, I've thought that in some sense or the other. So it's really, I'm glad you asked that, Amy. Yeah.
I think we have to ask them questions. Yeah. And I think, like you said, that a question that you ask, you will be given the answer. Totally. Yeah. Someone else has had that experience. So yeah.
The other thing I'd say in the caring relationship, though, because I think, like, when it's a family member and, like, what you were saying is, like, yes, the saviour thing, but also just, like, when you're caring for another, right? I wish we all looked at our brain, the amount of care we could give ourselves and others as, like, a pie chart, okay? Again, a bit worky.
I was doing this today with my friends.
Really?
Dishing out my pie.
Dishing out your pie, okay.
I did that this morning.
Oh, my God. But, like, so in a one-on-one relationship, I like to think about it as, like, I've got to have 50%. Like, I can't, and I actually think with family members and loved ones, it's the easiest.
I think I've done this in therapy. Yeah,
Oh,
as
you
well.
probably have.
We've all had our pie.
But it's the easiest to just like give yourself this tiny slice of the pie and be like, you have everything because I'm so concerned about you. And ultimately, you can only do that for a certain amount of time. And then if you start like cutting down your piece of pie, then you're hungry, and then you're hangry, and then you're just there being like, no, this is too much. If you don't look after yourself, you cannot look after others. And like, I feel like I'm only good at that since 2021. I burnt out doing the charity. I was like, I must save the world. You know, there's too much suicide-related grief. And I was like, right, well, now I can't do the charity because I'm in a really mentally unwell space. So how has that helped anyone? So it's like the boring advice that we take, but with caring for others and loved ones, got to think about how much pie you got for yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, you need some more pie,
got all the
girl.
pie. I need pie.
You need more pie.
I'll take small pie.
We've got time for Q&A. So
Have we got any QR code?
Yeah, I've got a good one here that I feel like I can talk on. I've been struggling with feeling so disconnected to the world. My mum died in March, and I feel like everyone is moving ahead and I've been left in the past. Do you have any tips on coping with this feeling, especially whilst also knowing that deep down you just want to move ahead with your life too? So, I was literally crying about this today with my friends. And I said to them, I wish that I could pause the world, and I know that I need to heal, and I know that I've got so much work to do, and it's going to take me ages, and like I can't do everything at the same time. And I said, like, I wish I could just pause the world for the next 2 years and just heal. Not obviously I'm going to be healing for the rest of my life, but I wish that I could, because it's so hard when you feel like the world is spinning and you can't keep up. But who is asking you to do that? Like, no one is.
Well,
I mean,
it feels like society
is. But like, when you really like, you can't give people what you want to give them without helping yourself. And like, I don't know, it's hard when you want everything to slow down because the world is spinning and you can't keep up with it, and you can't hold down a job, and you can't do everything that everyone else is doing, and you feel like you're the only one that can't. You can.
It's not now.
Not now. Your body is telling you that you need to calm down and like really just give yourself some time. And it feels hard. And I always say that like, by the time I'm done, everyone else is going to be 10 steps ahead, and I'm sick of feeling disadvantaged, and every aspect of my life is fucked, and I'm on the back burner for everything. But like, that is going to be what I'm living. I am living it every single day, so I have to be gentle and I have to be patient.
Yeah.
Like 100%, like being gentle with yourself. Also, March is fucking like well done for fucking being here. Whoever wrote this is like, my God. And like that bubble bursting moment that you've written about there, like is like the moment, the funeral, the weeks after, people are checking in, going like, how are you doing? They're right front of mind. And then they move from being like, yeah, of course you're not going to come to the party, to, but don't you think you should? Fuck that. Like, who said that you should do anything at any one time? And being gentle, I think, is key. I also think, you know, you're under a year, like, for me, the coping strategies you're asking about, there are amazing tips and guidance out there. For me, I was somebody that didn't think about like visioning or like trying to give myself moments and things I was going to look forward to or find difficult or whatever. But I hated to think about the future, but I wrote about it and I kind of journaled and prepped myself a little bit more. Like I was so nervous for that first anniversary. And I feel like that would be coping strategies for me in that immediate aftermath, is like to try and find some things that you can look forward to and engage with in that space would be my things.
I'm amazing in there, to come back to the last part of that question where you said like, and feeling like you want to move on as forward as well, and that can be the really complex part as well when you're looking around you, and as you said, Alicia, like you feel like you're on a back burner, and I feel like you're not on a back burner, you've just been put on a completely different path. So like you were maybe ticking along with your friends, family, and your peers, maybe all going down this one trajectory, and all of a sudden this horrific thing has happened to you and you've just been completely plonked and put into another one. And it's not that you're going back, it's that yours is just you're going in a completely different way and you're learning about yourself, about grief, everything like that, but it doesn't feel like that you're going on an onwards trajectory, because you are, but you feel like I'm just so far removed from what I knew before. And it's, of looking around at everyone who is like moving on and moving forward with their life, it is one of the just awful, I always say it's kind of like a blessing and a curse that life does move forward after. I never say on, always forward after loss, because there's so much times that when you're in that immediacy of grief, you're like, I kind of want to be so far away from this and this pain and this agony. And it's like, it's a blessing that life does move forward. We do look back and we go, fuck, it's been how many years gone by, and not just years passing, but noticing in yourself that like, oh yeah, I am healing, I'm looking after myself. But then also the curse of like, oh my God, time does move so fast away from when my person was here. And then when you look around at your peers and kind of what's going on, and you feel like they're 10 steps ahead of you or what it is, it's kind of just always coming back to you of like, something completely life-altering has happened to me, and so how I see myself and how in the world is going to be different to people in my life, but that doesn't mean that my life can be any less great. It's just going to be different. And different can, we're all different, and that's okay, and just holding that, and that your life moving from forward is, it's going to be totally different, but there's still a possibility of a really beautiful life, and you're worthy of it, totally.
Beautiful. Really nice. Thank you, Amber. Okay, I'm going to read the next question. So, how do you navigate feelings of I could have done more, and that projecting onto other relationships? So this is a suicide-related question, I guess, with the feelings of I could have done more and how they're projecting this onto other friendships.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's a really, really common feeling. The like shoulda, woulda, coulda, like is a big, very, very common thing in suicide-related grief. I guess, like without knowing the specificities, like my kind of advice around this is like, the feelings are there. That doesn't mean they're valid, and I don't mean like everything we feel and emotions are valid, but like, talking to others about what you felt like you could have done, what you felt like you didn't do, right, is one of those things where somebody's probably going to tell you like, oh, but how would you have been able to do that without that resource?
Yep.
How would you have been able to say that? Like, in hindsight, all of these things are massive, and bear in mind we've given counselling to over 1,000 people, with speaking to people all the time. I can tell you in vast majority of cases, you can work through that and realise that actually, like, it's not responsibility. Looking back on a situation, if it wasn't raining that day, if this didn't happen, if this majority of things lead back to being out of your control. And somebody dying by suicide is normally a lot of different compounding issues and complexities that have led to that person dying. Yeah. And so those feelings are completely normal. But my big thing is talking about them and having the confidence to go. I mean, in my situation, I didn't realise for a while that I was feeling blame, and mine was really like niche. It was like really intrinsic. Like maybe I was so okay that she didn't think she needed to mother me, and that gave her a lack of purpose. And I was like, fuck, that took me a while to realise. But that was what I felt.
So deep, it goes so deep.
It's so deep, yeah. But I think we're also far meaner to ourselves than we are to others.
100%.
It's like, think about what you'd say to a friend. You'd be like, Faith, that wasn't your fault, or that didn't come across like that, or fuck it, you had your own shit going on in that moment. So that, think about how, and if you do talk to somebody, they're probably going to talk to you like a friend and do that. Anyway.
I always tell myself that. No, you go. I was just going to say, like, I've had to do a lot of work in that, like, training myself how to talk to myself. Yeah. Because obviously you blame yourself for a lot of things, even not only exclusive to suicide deaths, but just like, oh, if something was different that day, if I did this that day, if I didn't miss that call, if I didn't shout at them that time, like, you just feel guilty about everything, but you can't live like that. And that's what I've had to tell myself, is that you can't. You'll drive yourself insane, because if you did that in every aspect of your life, it just wouldn't work.
Yeah. Can I also recommend a book for this, which is called This Book Could Save Your Life? And it's written by Ben West, one of our ambassadors, and he writes about losing his brother to suicide. And they had a fight on the day that his brother died. And he carried that responsibility, that blame, like really rank for a really long time. And he writes about it so fucking beautifully in his book. And it's also a really easy, fun read. It's got self-care tips. He is amazing.
He's
So,
amazing.
book recommendation.
Yeah, I love
I'm
that.
definitely gonna read that.
The only thing I'll add on that, I was at a conference a couple of weeks ago, and just as you were talking there about like being kind to yourself, of talking to yourself like a friend, and this therapist was saying something of like, you don't redeem, because when you're talking like of that, a lot of that I think is rooted in like your value of yourself. When you lose someone to something like suicide or addiction, that shoulda, coulda, woulda, you feel really valueless. Like you feel like, oh, I fucked up, whatever it is. And redeeming value and love is not it's not going to happen in harshness. It's never going to. You're not going to ever build that value for yourself, that love for yourself, that respect back for yourself, in being harsh yourself. Like, just do it's got to be in love and tenderness completely.
100%.
Yeah.
We say that. I had a realization this year, actually, whilst I was doing a talk, exactly about what you just said. It was like, so if everyone says grief is just love with nowhere to go, so then when you lose someone, that love that you're supposed to give to them, you need to give to yourself.
Yeah.
And by doing that, you're giving it to them.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, that
Yeah.
just really makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Fucking hell.
Fucking
That is so nice.
I love that. It is. Yeah, it has got
It
somewhere
is.
to go. Totally.
You've got to give it back to
you.
yourself.
Absolutely. I adore that. Right. So our next question.
Yeah.
Hello. So my partner has lost her mum. Oh yeah, was I meant to do that? Was I meant to get
Yeah,
back
go
to you?
on.
Oh, sorry. So my partner has lost her mum, who I was extremely close to, and I looked at her as my own mother, and her death hit us both hard. But I know my grief is incomparable to my partner's. So my question is, how can I be more understanding of her grief, and how can I offer the best support possible for her, and what questions do I ask her when she's hit with a grief bomb? Great question, and I just want to say, first and foremost, just you being here and asking that question is really beautiful and a clear indicator that you're a really kind and compassionate and caring partner. So thank you for this. I will say, I'm going to come to the latter bit, and then I'll pass it around so you can read too. What questions do I ask when she's hit with a grief bomb? I always find it sometimes it's not questions. You know, it's like, what's that saying? It's like, do you want solutions or just listening?
Yeah.
And it's sometimes we can really jump to, what do you need fixing? You know, so much, you know, like my partner's in the room, you know, we went through hell. It was hard. When you're watching someone you love who's in pain, and then of course you are holding your own grief for that person as well, it throws you west completely. But sometimes it's keeping those lines of communication open and realising that maybe your partner, it doesn't always need a question, so it just needs a listening ear, and someone that's finding a way between you both to find a way to kind of, decipher that in moments when grief bombs or moments hit. And just the part on there about grief being incomparable. And when I say it's not like it needs to be compared, you know, holding your pain as well. I think that's something that can actually be really connecting in partnerships when there's been a shared loss of that. It's quite typical that like the partner who's supporting the person who's had the loved one die to like squash their grief and to pack it away. But sometimes what can be the most connecting thing is when that person, like the partner, can say like, oh my God, like, yeah, I really miss your mum, and kind of bring them into it as well. And it's not then you in that, you might feel in that moment being like, oh, I'm talking about me feeling grief for her mum, but it can be really well kind of for your partner to know that it's not just them who's carrying this grief for their mum, and to just have that shared experience too. So really great question. How about you guys, if you want to read it through?
Yeah, I mean, I think you've said everything I would say. I think the disenfranchised grief would be the term of like feeling like, it's like, and also like the Grief Olympics of what you said of like, oh, but you're feeling worse, you know, you are more affected, so I will like lessen myself, and I think like that's fully valid feelings. I would say everything that Amber said, and I feel like the fact that you've put in the question means you're probably doing the best out of a lot of people. Like, genuinely, loads of relationships aren't asking the fucking question, aren't coming to the grief events, and aren't leaning in. And I just think to be able to lean in and be like, I don't know what is helpful, what would be helpful, you know, and just try and find that, I think, is just so brave.
And I think, just to be a bit, tactile as well, because I know sometimes it can, like, hearing that, it's all like, oh, okay, but what can I actually do with that? Actually giving you some things. I think definitely immersing yourself into the online space. That, you know, the sad thing, as I was saying earlier, there's so many of us now online doing stuff. There's so many resources that are accessible. So coming online and finding pages like mine and sort of reading actually what people who are living through grief are actually talking about, and hearing it through a third party's voice kind of gives you, it sounds almost really like it shouldn't, but being able to read or hear or consume someone else's content that is similar to what your partner or anyone that you're supporting is going through can just really give you a perfect window into, like, shit, is that what my partner is going through? And there's just so many books, there's so many podcasts, there's so many resources that you can, in your own time and your own pace as well, like, just consume that content and learn about it in your own way that you find fitting.
100%. I think it's important to give, like, the actionable advice as well, like that, because a lot of people do just feel completely lost with what to do with their partner's grief. But I was just going to add, like, the warmth of sharing that experience. So for context, the relationship I was in when I lost my mum completely broke down because there was zero communication and my suppression levels were through the roof. Which is obviously going to happen, but he was experiencing that grief as well. So the moments where he shared that with me, it wasn't like, whoa, this is my thing. It was like, oh my God, you remember, you like it's warming and it's nice. And I think obviously you know your partner better than us, but like for me, that was helpful. But I obviously didn't allow it to go any further than that in terms of, like, I was so closed off. So I think sharing that experience can only be a good thing, and it can only be a positive thing because it means that you're less likely to be suppressing in the way that I was. But yeah, I think you should be very proud of yourself for doing all the learning that Amber was talking about, because it's hard.
I agree.
Can I add another action? You go. I was just going to add another action. Again, it's a bit worky. But the tip that we say with, like, thing for people to remember is, like, when you in a supporter role, like for anybody that's supporting the grievers out there, or even the grievers that are supporting other grievers, when you know someone's going through a really shit time in grief or otherwise, it can be really difficult to start a conversation. And we have a piece of advice which is around contextualizing your questions, right? So asking someone, how are you, is so fucking awkward when you know that they're awful, right? And what are you supposed to say back to that? Yeah, really crap, thanks for asking. But by contextualizing it and going, how are you today? How did you get on at the weekend? How's your grief feeling this week? Like, if you're in the grief space, you know, you're talking about it, then say that directly is so great because it allows somebody to answer it easier. It allows them to be like, actually better than last week, or, you know, not as good as last week, you know, and it gives that little bit of space, and it also just makes it easier to ask the question. Like, that's my big, like, contextualizing, or make it about sleep or work admin or eating, you know.
That's so useful to know. I've never actually, I knew that it was like, you should always, I could easily reply to a question of how are you today, more so than how are you, because you're like, fine, thanks you. But like hearing you say it that plainly,
that's it.
It's got
great.
parameters, hasn't it?
Yeah.
It's got parameters. It's got like an actual objective of like when you say how are you, and it's like dying inside. Like, I don't know. Like, and you know, from this morning to this afternoon to this evening, I don't know. But when you just see that today, you're like, okay. And sometimes when you're really in the thick of it, or you're supporting someone who's really in the thick of it, sometimes just like, how have you been this morning? Like, really taking each day by day, like minute by minute, because as we know, grief in an hour, you can like go from one end to the other. So yeah, it's a great tool to use. I agree.
Tool.
Worky tool.
Right. Next question. Okay. My best friend took their own life New Year's of this year, and I'm basically preparing for the worst feeling-wise this New Year's. Is there any advice you would give to a person on the anniversary of such a sudden and tragic loss? I lost my best friend at New Year's too.
I was going to say,
and it was New Year's Day. and it was horrible. Because we were together for New Year's, and it was crazy. But I've never really thought about it like that, to be honest, in the sense of like, New Year's is already hard, right, when you're grieving, because you're going through a new year, there's so much pressure to be a good version of yourself again, and it's like, I'm not ready to do that. I don't want to do that. So to think about the fact that you've got New Year's and you've got the anniversary of your friend's death, I suppose the way I see it is that both of those events are going to be hard, regardless if they're on that day or not. And like, so it is New Year's for me too, but like with Mum's anniversary, it's not anywhere near New Year's, and I still grieve her at New Year's. So like, basically what I'm trying to say is that like, no matter how, like, I suppose it's harder when you've got an anniversary in a holiday where everyone is celebrating, and you don't feel like you can celebrate, but there's no pressure for your New Year's to look the same as it used to. I don't really celebrate New Year's anymore in the same way. I get together with my friends and I tell them about how much I love them, and we do that for each other on New Year's because that's all I need and that's all we all need. But I think to eliminate the pressure that New Year's has to look the same and you have to party and you have to go out and you have to do all of these things when it doesn't feel right is really important. And like, you don't have to keep up. Like, you don't have to keep up with all of these things that are telling you that this Christmas should look like this and this New Year should look like this. Like, you don't need to keep up with all that. Just do what you need to do on those anniversaries to get through it, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, we've got loads of guidance on our website about work. No, but legit. And also you can call our helpline, because, like, I think it builds a lot of anxiety around it. And so we have guidance on the website. If you want to chat to someone about it, call our helpline. But also, one thing I'd say is plan, and I know that sounds quite weird. It's like, it doesn't need to be a plan as in like living up to the expectation of New Year. But one thing that I really struggled was like, my family, we didn't talk to each other about what we all wanted on the first anniversary. And so we were all kind of there, and like somebody did a random toast, and I was like, fuck off. Like, why have you just turned us all into crying? And then it was like, oh, well, it was just so weird. We hadn't planned it. We were all like, this is happening and we're going to be together. But by being like, would everybody like to like write a little memory, or should we do a toast, or should we go around the table? Like, there is lots of different ways to do it, and there's no right way. But to know what you're all kind of wanting instead of just going into it blind is just like such a nice thing to try and do. Like the fact that you meet with your friends and like, I don't know how you got to that, but like knowing that everyone wants to experience it in that way. Like I always go to a musical because that's what my mum loved, but it took us a while to get there. We had like a couple of like bleak years with Jackie P's. Exactly, that's what, yeah, but now we have a Jackie P.
Amelia basically this story that Jackie P. Amelia basically told me this story that she, on your mum's birthday, don't you? Yeah. She always has a jacket potato.
With tuna fish and sweet
tuna
corn.
fish, my order, banging. And so whenever I have a Jackie P, I always think of your mum. But yeah, like it's these rituals that we curate that that help these days. Yeah. My only thing I was going to add to that, to like as you're saying about of planning, that can be, it's great, but sometimes you're like, what am I planning? I don't know what I want to do. Yeah. And especially at a time of year when it is like New Year's Eve, and as we said, where it's like a celebratory, and it's like I really don't feel in the mood to celebrate. What I always find when I work with people and what I say, because it'd be like, you know, you see online people doing like, especially with like anniversaries, because it's weird. It's like you want to mark the day, but not in celebration of like some people do, but typically you don't. It's not a day you want to celebrate, but you want to mark it and you want to honour it. And you're like, what does that look like? I don't know. And of course, it will all look different to all of us. Some will want to be with people and get together. Some of us will want to recluse, whatever it might be. And I always say, and when I work with people, and even myself, I always think, for me to even think about the actual plan of what I want to do is I always think of what do I want to feel. And it's starting there. Do I want to feel? I want to feel safe. So if you're feeling like, I want to feel safe around this, I want to feel joy, I want to feel happy, I want to feel fucked up, whatever. You kind of go, that's kind of like your base point. So like if you want to feel safe, I want to feel safe. What makes me feel safe? my friend this, or being at home, and kind of almost like mind mapping it, and then kind of the vision for that day around that time becomes a bit clearer, and you're like, there's the plan. There's kind of the escape, or if it's escape plan or whatever it might be. But just I always feel like, what do you want to feel around that time?
That is so good. I'm literally going to use that. That really, really helps you decide.
Yeah.
But I feel like sometimes you don't know. Like sometimes you go into the day and you think it's going to look like this, and it looks completely different. And because your emotions you can't control, and grief just presents itself in different ways at different moments.
Yeah.
But after that exercise, I would say, like what I do as well is, I have a backup. So if I'm feeling that way, I have that person that's like, oh, my escape plan. Like, oh, I don't want to stay in bed and cry. I actually want to have fun. And they're there and they know the deal and they're there.
Yeah.
That's what I would add, which I love.
Options.
I love
It's a
that.
foolproof plan.
Okay. So if you have got some spare paper in front of you and you haven't used it all up, I would love for you to use the last bit of paper to basically write your best piece of grief advice on it that you've been given or that you just know yourself. And then I'll give you a few minutes to do that. And the point of this is we're going to pass them 2 people to the right or just 1 person to the right. So everyone gets a new piece of grief advice, and you can share your wisdom, because I'm sure it'll be very different between you all, but I'm sure there's a lot of wisdom in the room. Whilst we're doing that, you're reorganising. Whilst you guys are writing your best bits of grief advice, I'm going to take it to the ladies to find out theirs. So, Alicia, start with you. What's your best piece of grief advice?
There's a lot. I've had quite a good advice throughout my grief journey, but I think the one that I always refer back to the most is day by day. Take it day by day. And that's the first piece of grief advice that I ever got. After, I think it was straight after it happened, and I was like, what do I do now? What do I do now? And my auntie just looked at me and she said, you take it day by day, and you take it minute by minute, and if in 1 minute you want to go outside, and then in 5 minutes after that you want to be inside, you do that, and you just listen to your brain in every single second, and you ask it what it wants, and you give it what it wants. And that's how I pretty much survived so far.
Got yours ready?
Yeah.
Amelia. Go.
I'll go actually off Alicia, because you said listen to your brain. Mine would be listen to your body as well. Listen to it all. I think your body is your biggest indicator to just what is, of course, going on, especially up here and in here. I think it tells us so much. Our nervous system, whatever it is, it tells us when we feel safe, when we don't feel safe, when we need support. Just listening to your body and to get to a point where you can find, be really intrinsically in tune with your body will be different for all of us, whether it is through things like therapies, things like movement, whatever it is, but just becoming really at one with your body. And it's not, always moving with it, but really just getting to know, like, oh, I don't feel right here, or that's, it's like learning your triggers and learning what is your because like with triggers, essentially, we don't know a trigger until it turns up in our door and we're like, oh shit, this is a trigger now. But it's kind of like, what is in my toolkit to calm me down in this moment, to bring me back to me. Just really listening to your body, because it will give you the answers. It will give you the bingo like that. Just straight.
I have 2.
Oh.
The first one is this amazing practitioner called Josh Dixon, who you'll meet soon. Yeah. So he did this exercise with us. So he was like, so look at your hand and imagine your hand is the grief you've been through.
Guys.
Let's do it. So imagine that your hand is the grief, okay? It's not the person you've lost, it's the grief. Now put it up to your face, right? And it's fucking intense, right? You can't see what else is around it. Okay, and you can't look at it. Now pull it back, and pull it back, and further away, and you start to see other shit around you, right? And that is what's going to happen over time, okay? Woo!
Love that.
But legit, and sometimes it's going to be like that, and sometimes it's going to be like that. But that is where we're going. It's not going to go away. It's not going to go over there, but it might be over here. But realistically, it is going to do that. The rest of the focus is going to come round. The other bits of life is going to come back. You're going to have a better vision around it. Okay, so that's 1. And then 2 is have playfulness with your care regime, your self-care toolbox, whatever it is. Just like the menu, okay? If you like salmon today, you can like beef tomorrow, you could go vegan, you could go veggie. There is playfulness with what you can get, what you can access. Right now, you're at this fucking cool event. You know, then you could apply for therapy, then you could call a helpline. In 2 years' time, you could start your own podcast. Like, there's ongoing stuff you can do, and that playfulness is exciting and fun. It doesn't sound like it when it's about grief, but there are amazing things out there, and they're all at your disposal.
I love that. Mine sounds so simple and boring compared to yours now, but it's literally just the things that I tell myself. So the main things that I tell myself is, how do I put it without sounding? It's just literally let yourself feel it. And it's so basic, but it's like, I spent so long being like, no, not going to feel that, don't need to feel that, I'm doing good. But like you said at the very beginning of the talk, Amber, like, it will come and bite you in the arse if you suppress and you suppress and you suppress and you don't talk about it and you don't bring it into your present day and you don't just kind of face it a bit head on. And it sounds scarier than it is.
Yeah.
And it's possible to do it, because I never thought it would.
Yeah. No, yeah, and that's great. Yeah, simple.
Yeah.
It's all that the cliche things are. They're cliches because they are true, and it is like you've just got to feel it to heal it and stuff. Yeah, totally.
Feel it to heal
Feel
it.
it to heal it. Yeah.
So, guys, just wanted to say thank you so much for coming. I hate using the word brave because it cringes me out, but it seriously is really brave for you to be here. And that's coming from someone who would literally steer clear of anything grief-related for a lot of years. Do you know the first thing I ever came to was your Losing Young talk?
Oh,
Ever.
last September.
Ever.
Yeah.
That was the first thing I ever went to.
That was so nice.
But it's really helped me in just normalising it and just accepting what's happened. And you guys are all doing that. The small steps are big, and you should all be proud of yourself. So round of applause, and thank you for coming.
Thank you. Thank you, Amy and Alicia, for putting us up.
Woo!